Welcome to the lighter side of RC. We're working on a BVM F100. This thing's been quite a process and project so far. This is video 8 in the series. If you've missed any of the videos, there's a playlist link down below that takes you to all of the videos. We're in the organizing and detail stage of this aircraft, so let's dive back in. So in the last video, we just finished up with getting our battery holders printed. They're actually printing right now. And we're kind of jumping way ahead. There's still so much organizing to do in the actual wiring end of things, but I need to have all of this stuff laid out before I can continue with the plan. So what I've done here is our duct is still loose, our guy is just sitting in there, but I'm just trying to figure out where our battery plugs are gonna go. So I'm thinking maybe this center battery, do I wanna plug it in here? These two side batteries, they're gonna plug in right there. And so what I'm figuring out now is we've got our airlines right here, our airline connectors that operate the locks for the canopy. So what I'm doing is just getting this guy installed and seeing where we are going to run our lines. So I think we're probably okay because we can run those lines like this and they really don't interfere with our, if we put a battery plug right there. So the reason I'm thinking about the turbine one here is the GSU is right underneath this duct, right in this area. So if we need to disassemble this plane for any reason, we can obviously take the canopy off. That separates with the pin right here. This piece can come out and our battery lead, which is just going to go down like this, that can hang off the side. And then if we needed to take it out any further, that could unplug from the GSU or the, sorry, I'm calling it a GSU, the hub, the data relay module hub, the Pro hub, which is right underneath there. So I think that is probably a really good plan, and it looks like everything's going to work out here with that. I am going to have my BVM air fill valve probably right there because it's not going to interfere with anything and we'll have good access. Whew, this plane is a mental challenge. All right, so just playing around with this, spacing and everything, and you know what? I'm overcomplicating this. It just makes more sense to have our plugs plug in right back here. Again, this plug-in can go right down to the GSU. That doesn't change anything, so I'm overcomplicating this because if we have those plugs mounted here, our center turbine can plug in right there. Our side turbine plugs in a little, or our side battery plugs in a little bit further back. This one plugs in right there. Super simple, nice and easy, uses this space, which when our bypass is sitting in here is totally wide open. So we'll just do it like that. That makes more sense. Good plan. All right, now I share with you guys, I'm actually really excited right now and happy because we've got those batteries sorted out, and I feel like that was the last big hurdle to wrap my brain around. So with that stuff figured out, I have a clear path going forward, which for me is always a very energetic, energizing feeling. So very excited. So I've got the turbine lead done up here. This one actually works out perfectly. So what I'm going to do, because all of our electronics for the control system are all down the left side of the plane, we're going to put our two flying or receiver or central box leads right here. So this battery and this battery will plug into there. The battery on this side will be our turbine battery, and that'll plug into this side. So this is one of our XT60 holders, and that's going to mount right there. We'll glue those to the side, and we'll do two on that side. So I've done this guy up with the battery lead there. This is the one from the actual Chicoy turbine, and it's the perfect right size, so that's great. And then our two black ones here, those will have the battery plugs for the receiver portion. Now you got to keep in mind that one of the batteries is going to feed central box port number 1 and the lighting system. The other lead is going to plug into central box port number 2 and the compressor that's in the front. So all of that stuff is down this side, which is why it makes the most amount of sense to do that. So perfection. So I'm going to pull this stuff out now, and then we're going to start working on our battery plugins, our power supply, which is wicked because that is, again, I've got a clear path going forward. Again, I can't tell you how excited I am to have the plan going forward. So we've got all of our wiring done here. So these are our 2 power plugs for as I was talking about. So those come forward. We've got battery 1, which also has leads coming off, which is going to go to the Unilight, and then battery number 2, and those leads go forward and they're tied into the compressor. And then on the other side, we've got our turbine power, so that just drops right down and plugs right into the data relay module, so that is perfection. And we're gonna have keepers and everything holding those guys down, but that is wicked. So now I'm gonna clean those battery leads up a little bit, put some keepers down, and whew. All right, so our power cables here are all run and cleaned up and everything. Light controllers plugged in. Also ran the lead for going to the central box from the light controller. That goes behind the central box, up and around. Fits perfectly. It's like I intended it to be that way. And we've got our compressor wires fastened down as well. So power wiring is complete, which is super exciting. We need to put a keeper down here on the turbine one, but that's no big deal. So next thing to do is start working on the rest of our wiring. Now there's really not a whole lot to show other than we're making up our own leads, right? So, you know, when we run the leads from the Cortex, the Chicoy turbine hub, the wings, we're trying to make that as clean as possible. Obviously we're avoiding things that are moving, like the air brake cylinders and stuff. So I'm just gonna spend some time routing that stuff. There's really not a whole lot to show other than just do your best to keep things clean. The only other thing we have wire-wise to run from the front is we've got our brake solenoid to run to the central box. And then we also have our telemetry line and our RC input to run from the Chicoy sequencer. And then we're gonna have some extensions mounted somewhere in the plane here that you can have access to everything. So for example, the Chicoy sequencer will have an extension lead run where it's accessible, so we can plug in a terminal afterwards and change things as we need to. The lighting controller, Cortex, all that kind of stuff. It's just the normal that we do here. Well, it's the next day, and I don't feel like we got hardly anything done, but so much wiring in this plane. Definitely arduous. I spent, I think it was a total of 7 hours yesterday doing wiring on this plane. And now I know you guys, your critics out there are gonna say, you must be really slow. Well, no, that's not really it. What happens with this plane is everything's gotta be perfect size because we don't want any excess floating around anywhere. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So like, all of these guys right here that come to the whole Cortex and turbine area, right? They all go down, up and around into their respective locations. But if you had a bunch of excess in this area, you run the risk of maybe it getting caught underneath the air brake stuff, you know? So it's important to not have any excess, which is why we're doing what we're doing. We also have all of these extension leads for all of our programming ports. So those are 7 ports that all go to different devices. So those were all specific. You know, I'm routing those lines, getting them all sized up perfectly, and then running them. So just a ton of time to get the fuselage wiring completed. Now I think I'm pretty much done the fuselage wiring. I've gone through and kind of planned out everything that I needed to plan out. We've got our primary receiver sitting right on this side here. Our clone is sitting on this side. We've got 2 leads going around the front, coming over to our clone. Right now that clone is plugged in, but we're gonna unplug the clone because when the owner sets it up on his radio, that's when we set the clone up. So just lots and lots of wiring and details. So it just takes a ton of time. And that's unfortunately what's happening with this project. I've been keeping track of my hours, and I didn't really have an idea when I started this project, but like I added up the hours yesterday and we're already over 100 hours. I'll tell you guys the final tally when we're done, but if I had to guess when we first started this project, in my mind, I was thinking maybe 60, 70 hours max, and we're already over 100. So unfortunately, it's going to be quite the project when it's done. So next thing we're moving on to is the wing wiring. So finally getting to the wings. So we've got, obviously everything's done on our wing side. That was all taken care of on the wing episode, but we've got our ashlock connectors already sitting in here. So this will designate what happens on the fuselage side. And then we've got our air leads here as well too, which can also be hooked up. We have a little bit of stuff to do on the air side. So these are all going to be very much the same. You know, you've got your lighting leads here, for example. Those have to go to the lighting controller, and then our other leads need to go to the fortunately, they're all going to the central box, which is going to be fairly straightforward. So, but that's the next thing we're doing. Again, nothing special other than making sure your wiring is the right size, protecting it where it needs protecting, and just getting it all done. Well, exciting success here. So all of our wiring is done. That is, what a project. So I'll just give you guys some shots here. I mean, planes like this have a lot of wiring to begin with, but on this one, everything is so exposed that you just get to see everything. That side is not so bad. It's mainly that side where everything comes together on that central box. But anyways, we've got everything kind of tacked in place now. I went through and kind of zip tied some things around. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and put some shoe goop on all of our little connectors or holders. So these guys right here, some of them we have glued down, some of them we don't. I just want to make sure that they're nice and solid. And then what we will do at this stage is we will turn the plane on and confirm that all of our wiring is doing what it's supposed to do. So, you know, you want to check that before you start covering things up is really the issue here. Now we do have our canopy valves still that we haven't run anything to as far as airlines go. So fortunately, this whole secondary system, we'll call it that, I can take forceps and just pinch off that yellow line, and that's going to prevent any of the air in the gear system from going into the canopy and you know, air brake system and all that kind of stuff. So that's good. The other thing with the air system is I filled this up a couple days ago, or put some air in here a couple days ago, and now if we go like doors open as an example, they still have air in the system, which is good. So what does that mean? It means on the after side of the valve, we don't know yet, but everything coming up to the valves is good because it's holding air. So the one thing we have to check now is everything after the valve. So when these valves turn on and there's pressure in the green line as an example, which ultimately is pressurizing the cylinders, we want to make sure that it's holding air. Good success. I'm going to go through and shoe goop some stuff. Ultimately at the end here, we will shoe goop all of our leads, which is something I do on all of my planes, but we don't want to do that until we're 100% sure that all of our servo leads are correct. All right, so wing connections are now done. So we've got our wiring done, of course, and our airlines as well too. So airlines, we put a piece of spiral wrap around each airline, and we've got our end on there. And then coming through the fuselage, we come through about 1/2 inch on the spiral wrap. And then I've also put some goop over top of the connectors here so they don't come out. But once this tank's in place, it's gonna hold everything in place anyways, but this is just for the initial install. So I think we're ready to install the wings now on the plane. That's a bit of a challenge. And I think the only thing that we may struggle with a little bit, because we haven't had an opportunity to check this, is the mating between the flap actuation arm and the actual flap surface itself. So we'll have to check that and see, but I think it's time to get these wings installed. So the reason we're doing it in this order is because, like I said, we need to make sure that all of our systems and everything work before we start progressing with the install of the items in the plane that hide things. So the front duct, the fuselage, tanks, or the tanks, cockpit, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff to check before we move forward. All right, so we got one wing installed. Now these wings are definitely a challenge getting everything lined up. It's obviously nice on a new aircraft when you've got a wing tube. It makes things much easier. These guys with the carbon arms coming out, they're definitely a bit of a challenge, but there's a shot of the wing installed on the aircraft and looks good. There's basically 5 bolts holding the carbon arms from the wing. So we have 3 on the leading edge, 2 on the trailing edge, and they're just carbon flat plate arms. There's another shot right there. Obviously, we've got way better access now through the top of the plane. You got to remember that when this plane's put together, you're basically going to have 0 access through the top of the plane, and everything has to be done through the wheel opening. So right now, this is actually quite a bit easier than it will be once the entire equipment layout is installed. So obviously, this is possible to do by yourself. If I had somebody else at the field helping me do this, I would get them to hold the wing up without putting it in the fuselage, and then I would install all of our connectors and everything and airlines, and then I would plug the wings into the fuselage is how I would do it, but obviously I'm by myself, so we got to make it work. Definitely a challenge, that is for sure. This is a plane you probably don't want to do too often by yourself. So when I'm doing this from the top side, I'm just using my long Dubro Allen key with the ball end. But from the underside, I suspect you're probably going to end up using like an L-bend with the ball end to get these done up. Because as I mentioned, everything's got to be done through the gear openings. So I'm not getting these tightened down right now. I'm just lifting the end of the wing, and I am snugging these guys down or getting them turned in all the way. Once they're turned in all the way, then I will snug them all down. And that is wings installed. All right, and just because of spacing on this old aircraft, the Lukey stand and the fly right stand both don't really work that well, and I don't want to pull one of my hood stands out, so I've got it operating on both stands here, just because the Lukey stand is 39 inches center to center, and it doesn't allow our nose gear to extend all the way. So anyways, good solution. What I'm doing right now is I'm charging some batteries to do our first startup, and I am just covering our turbine cable with some snakeskin. All right, so this next step is always a little bit harrowing because it's the first startup with everything connected, but this is why the pre-planning is so important. So, for example, we have made sure that our gear sequencer was done properly and all that stuff. I'm going to put our flight mode in the mid section, so the leading edge should push forward, and then the halfway point. Yeah, we've got our turbine connected, so we can get our turbine programmed. We've got our GSU connected. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn this plane on, and what's going to happen is the compressor is going to kick on. Gear is in the down position, so hopefully the gear stays down and the doors close, because the doors are supposed to close. We'll let the compressor pump up, and that'll be check number 1, and then we'll see kind of go from there.
Receiver on. Flaps. Take off mode half flaps.
All right, so that's good. The reason nothing's working right now as far as controls go is we've got the receiver going through the Cortex, and the Cortex hasn't been programmed, which is actually perfect because that means none of our stuff is doing its thing. So yeah, even gear switch actually doesn't do anything right now. So that's good. Compressor pumped up, and everything looks well. We'll see if the telemetry comes through on the compressor. So V-Speak Air. So yeah, none of that stuff's coming through because we don't have a receiver working right now. So what we need to do is we need to plug in our bind plug into the Cortex and get that set first. So we'll do that. I'm gonna unplug the clone receiver so it's not confused. And now we take our Cortex plug, and that's what all of these plugs are for, and we're going to program our Cortex. So we've got to put the bind plug in, waiting for the single blue blink. There we go. Good. So that's a positive thing. Everything went where it was supposed to go, which is always awesome. And that's why the pre-programming is so important. Good. So now what we want to do is we want to do the next step of our Cortex programming. And that is turning the plane back off. All right, guys, so I spent a bit of time doing a little bit of adjustments here. So was basically getting all the leading edge set up, just playing with our points there. The way the leading edges are set up is because we've got individual surface adjustments. First thing I did was adjust our sub trim, which is our middle setting, and got that set up, and then adjusted our endpoints, which is the off and the full condition. So now it's set up as per the manual. So we got basically 3/8, well, the off, 3/8 and 5/8 for travel. The one thing I did notice here is our rudder cables are very loose now. I'm not sure why, so I need to check that out. I don't remember putting it together and having those rudder cables loose, so we'll have to check that out. But surface-wise, everything else looks good. I had to turn the ailerons way down a little bit, well, way down, significantly down, and I think. I looked in the old manual. We've got the 2002 manual, and I can't find any of the travels listed in that manual, so I have to do a bit of research. But so far, everything is working good. So now with all of our surface, everything is good. We're going to turn the model back on, and we're going to go through and do some of our checks and balances here. Okay, so far our gears all locked down, which is good. Brakes don't work because we've got that line pinched off. So that's good. Surface-wise, all of our surfaces are moving properly. Right aileron, left aileron, up elevator, forward elevator, right rudder, and steering are all correct. So that's good. So what we'll do now is we're going to take a look at our telemetry data here and just check things out. So if we go timer sensors, so SE6, which is fine, V-Speak Air, which is good. We're holding 6.5 bar. Our sequencer, 88 PSI, which is good. M-speed, obviously that's 0. Central box and turbine. That's what I was wondering, if our turbine was going to show up, and it did. So that's a positive thing. So it looks like all of our telemetry data is showing up correctly, which is perfect. We'll just blow into our M-speed sensor and confirm. So M-speed sensor works. So what I'm going to do now is a gear check to see how everything's working. So I've got our sequencer queued up here. And the compressor will kick on, so you'll hear that.
Timer is on and the gears are up.
Perfect. So after that one cycle, the pressure dropped a little bit, so we just let things do its thing. So I do hear a leak. It might be our pinched off lead here. All right, I can hear a little bit of a leak, so I'm going to try and figure out where that's coming from, and I'll report back to you. All right, so big challenge ahead here. Just doing a little bit of thinking. Now this may be complicated if you're not familiar with air systems, but air was up and the system was leaking air. So what was happening is our up line is the red line. So when the red line is pressurized, that is making the gear go up. So I had the gear all up and the system was leaking air. So what was happening was the blue lead here, if I clamped the blue lead off, the leak stopped. So the blue lead is the gear down lead. So clamped it off here, which feeds back to the rear and then also the front right here. So clamped it off here, clamped it off there, the leak stopped. Took it off, leak continued. Came to the wing locations here, clamped it off, leak stopped. Opened it up, leak continued. So if you think about it, that cylinder sitting here, red's pressurized, actually we'll use these colors. Cylinders right here, red's pressurized on this side, holding the gear in the up position, and air is coming out of blue. What does that mean? It means that air is leaking from the red side across the cylinder to the blue side and is coming back the blue lead. That means that the cylinders are leaking air in the main gear, both main gears. So again, these are just some of the challenges that this plane has brought to my world. And it means we need to take those cylinders apart and maybe replace O-rings, maybe inspect them, I don't know. But we need to first take those wings off, then take the gear out and take the cylinders out. All right, so how do we confirm my thinking here? So what we've got is we've got our leads. The fortunate thing with these guys is we can put the air chuck, air gun from my compressor, right like this, and it actually seals quite well. But I'm gonna hold the blue lead, which is the one that we had air coming through, in my mouth. And when I put air in the red side, which is gonna bring the gear into the up position, if I've got air coming back through the blue, then we know it's leaking across the cylinder. Which it is. It comes right in my mouth. So, all right, so here's a rundown of the challenges we're facing. So here's the air cylinder we took out. I tried to disassemble it. There's no obvious way to disassemble it. I tried heating it up, trying to pull this cap off, heated it up again, tried to like unthread it by the nipple, and nothing's coming off. Last resort, I put the T on there, held it in my vise, and you can see the marks around the air cylinder, tried to smack it with a hammer. So there's no way to service the cylinder. I tried putting excessive amounts of lube in here, and it didn't help at all. I put my compressor on one side and air is just blowing by this air cylinder. So that's a problem. Now, thank you, Kelly, my late friend Kelly, who I got my T33 from. I said, you know what? There was a bunch of extra parts in that T33 kit because it's so many generations old. I'm gonna pull that T33 box out and just look through the parts. And lo and behold, we've got 3 of these cylinders, which were wrapped up in this nice little blue foam or blue stuff. And this was for the original gear design, which used like frames and specific stuff. Found these, and other than the diameter, I'm not so worried about the diameter, but other than the diameter, the dimensions are essentially identical. So our fixing piece fits through, which is awesome. The nipples are oriented the same way. That one's obviously broken off, but the nipples are oriented the same way. Now the only difference is the shafts are very different thicknesses. So you can see here on an overview This is the old one, that's the replacement. So the ends of the shafts are very different. So we can't just take the stock hardware, which is this guy right here, and thread it in there. It doesn't fit. It's a really weird size, and so is this guy. So what I did was, I'm like, well, what kind of spacer can we find? So I took a 3mm bolt, 3mm blind nut, and if we take that blind nut and put it in there, the diameter is perfection. There's like a fraction of a millimeter of play. So what can we do? Well, we can sand this guy down, high solid in there, and then we've got a proper spacer, an adapter plate to get this onto the shaft. Now there's already threads in here, so the high sol is going to have lots to grab to. There's this. Now I can also, because there's lots of room in that cylinder, if I could find a tube and tap it with 3mm threads, the only problem is that this is pretty narrow. So I may use a longer bolt, put 2 of these pieces on, but in general, I'm happy because there is a solution. Now, tomorrow, it's already late, it's like 10:30 p.m. here. We're gonna try and contact BVM and see if they've got these replacement cylinders. That would be ideal because then everything's gonna work. If they don't have the replacement cylinders or they're gonna take a while, we've got a solution that we can work with. So either way, BVM comes through and we've got the replacement cylinders, or we've got a solution, which is awesome. So that makes me happy. Part of the struggle now is this plane's taken a long time, and we are leaving for Tucson in about 11 days. So this plane, I figured actually I was gonna get this done about 2 weeks ago, and it's crazy. So anyways, so I'm gonna call it a night. We're gonna get back to this tomorrow. Hopefully we've got a good solution going forward tomorrow, but we'll return and report. Well, we've got good news and bad news. I'm sure you want the bad news first. So Robert Lynch from BVM reached out to us in response to our question about these cylinders, and unfortunately they've been missing their plates, their press system for these cylinders. The ends are pressed in. They've been missing that press machine or plates or whatever they are for a long time, he said. So that's the bad news. He is going to check through cylinders to see, but that's very unlikely that he'll find anything. The good news, this is our replacement cylinder, and it looks like it's going to work very well. Very well. So I went a little bit further with my thinking yesterday and ended up taking a metal carf clevis, which is this guy right here, and actually using this. Now the actual spacing on the carf clevis, we've got about 2.5 to 3 times the amount of contact area on the clevis compared to what the blind nut would offer, which is what I was talking about in our previous clip. Double the amount of contact space. So I ended up gluing these in last night. I took the clevis, spread it open so it was like a Y. There's an example right there. And put a bolt through, put some lubricant on the bolt, high solid those in place. So what we are looking at now, which I think is going to work perfectly. I'm going to sand the excess metal off a little bit on the end, clean these guys up. We can just bend those and they'll just snap. And I think that's going to be perfect. So this has been curing now for 20-ish hours. The other huge benefit to these cylinders is they are serviceable. The top unthreads, and they are quite dry inside. Obviously they've been sitting for 20-ish years, and the grease is not gone, but it's quite dry. So we can lubricate these guys up nicely and get them all 100% ready to operate in this plane. I'm very thankful that we had these cylinders on hand. All right, so initial thoughts here. It looks like these are going to work. So gear is going out. Works fine. Cylinder is bottomed out in the slot, and we still have some travel. So as this is holding pressure, it's actually pulling that cylinder in still, which is good. And then our gear is going down, or up, sorry, and same thing. Cylinder's locked, shaft is locked all the way, and it looks good. All right, guys, so sort of success. Success number one is the gear now works. The leak isn't crazy. Failure number one is we do still have an air leak. It looks like it's probably in the door cylinders, but we still haven't done the nose gear cylinder yet, so we still need to do that. But I'll show you a gear cycle here. The gear does have a nice solid click when it goes up. Doors are nice and slow. You probably didn't hear the click because the compressor kicked on, but it's just a nice solid boom click. When I first fired this up, it was holding pressure quite well. So don't know why it's not holding pressure that great. But yeah, we're gonna take that nose. Gear apart, and so yeah, we're gonna take that nose gear apart, do the cylinder treatment on the nose, and then I have a sneaking suspicion we will probably have to change our door cylinders as well. So we've got, fortunately on this plane, 3 door cylinders. Now I haven't checked any of the cylinders for the air brake as an example. Yeah, so still dealing with stuff. All right, guys, and it's time for another episode of Tip Time, and this Tip Time is brought to you by my good friend that's helping me through this frustrating time, trusty bent screwdriver. So we got the nose cylinder done, and basically that worked out well. Everything's working well with the nose cylinder, still chasing a small leak. And that's what this tip time is about. So what I did, obviously we can't go in here and start spraying water everywhere or soapy water or anything like that to check our connections. So what I did was get some soapy water. This is dish soap and water. Take trusty bent screwdriver, dip it in the soapy water with just a little drop on the end, and start going through and dropping it on all of our T-fittings. Now you may be able to see it right now. It's bubbling right there. So when I had this just turned on, there was a huge mound of foam right here. So all of our leaks, as far as I can tell right now, are coming from that little fitting right there. So I did reuse some of these old fittings. So this could be one of the old fittings, I don't know. But basically what was happening here is if I pinched off the line right here, this is the line that feeds our gear and our doors, the leak would stop. If I pinched off the doors here, the leak would still happen. If I pinched off this side, the leak would still happen, but then as soon as I opened this up, took my forceps off, you could hear the air going into the system. So that's where I started dropping soapy water, and that's our problem fitting right there. So we're going to cut that fitting out, replace our lines. Unfortunately, this is a tough area to get to, but we got to do what we got to do, and we're going to replace that T-fitting. Well, guys, success on the gear. With the modifications and all the things that we did with this landing gear, I am extremely happy that it works. We really didn't have any other options. that were not massive hurdles to make this thing work. So very happy that our replacement cylinders worked out, and the gear is holding air perfectly. Did some stuff with the doors and everything, and then found our leak and replaced the T-fitting, and all that is wonderful. So everything worked out good with the gear. I suspect we're gonna have some more hurdles as we jump into the canopy solenoid, the wheel brake solenoid, the air brakes, the canopy locks. There's still a lot more air stuff to deal with. Maybe we'll get lucky, I don't know. With all the hurdles we dealt with in this episode, that's gonna wrap up video number 8 in the series, and I have a sneaking suspicion as long as things go smoothly, we will wrap this up in the next video, which is video number 9. Don't forget, in our previous video, we're doing a giveaway on a stand, and you needed to watch video 7 and make a comment with the word stand. And as I mentioned previously in our videos, we are doing our giveaways on the Lighter Side of RC After Dark channel. The After Dark channel is a completely separate channel where we do live streams from the shop, and that's where we'll announce the winner of our giveaways. So as of recording this coming Saturday, we're doing the giveaways for the UATs, and coming up after that, probably be a couple weeks because we're going to Tucson Jets. We'll do the stand giveaways coming up during a live, probably near the end of March. So keep an eye out for that, guys. Subscribe to the Lighter Side of RC After Dark, and we'll see you in the next video. I'm very excited to see everybody at Turbines and Tumbleweeds in Sweetwater, Texas, October 2nd to October 5th, 2025. See you there.